people made their childhood seem very tough, aggressive, and most importantly, they came out successful from it. When I look at myself, or when they happen to look at me, disappointment is the biggest virtue that stands out between both of us mutually. I mean, technically, I should be doing even better than them just because of natural order of things, you know? As the world's progressing, so should the children that follow it. But I'm obviously not, and because of that, I feel much more kiddish than them a lot of the time. Maybe because they're older and I can't actually know what happened back then, they're just talking out of their ass, and they're just over-exaggerating how successful or good or strong or difficult the times were, you know? And I have no way to prove that. For me, I feel like discipline is a short answer for that. Regardless, I'm still not happy with myself. Is this a skill issue? Or is this a genuine decline in masculinity?
Sex workers. People dislike them because they feel like it's something easy that takes no effort. This is generally the consensus I get from people that on their disdain for sex workers, other from the fact that they feel it's just morally wrong to sell their own body. And so for that reason, they disagree with them, and when they see somebody doing relatively something in that area, for example, OnlyFans, not necessarily that much of a sex worker where they're going out and actually doing the action, but they're selling their body in exchange for money. Now, I am an American, and so we live in a very capitalist, high-strung country, right? I personally think that it's pretty cool. The only issue is, of course, real-life people. Real-life people put in their own politics and their own disdain, and they ruin it. Things like racism, sexism, these things go inside of it, and it ruins the whole thing. But at the end of the day, I think capitalism and the idea of fighting for something every day, just modern day hunting, you know? Regardless, now that you understand my opinion of being fond of it, my opinion on sex workers is the same thing. I see them as nothing more than capitalists. I don't see a single issue with it at all. Yes, on a moral standpoint, you're proposing a more sex-oriented generation, but where does anyone else come in play? Is it only their fault? You can't blame the drug dealer for the overdose of the person. That's just taking responsibility away from the true criminal, which were the people in his life who never paid attention to him or didn't train him with any discipline. But again, I'm no fool to think that everybody in the world operates like this. Every man thinks like this, because I have real life experience, and I understand from my real life experience that this isn't really how people are. It is just a select few that happens to be on the internet. The issue comes with this. To those who are impressionable on the internet, when they see stuff like this, they begin to reciprocate that in their mind. And who is it that's reciprocating it? Young people. And I really not want to see any young people thinking like that. Anyways, here's a shit ton of pasta. Like, for example, I feel like I personally have an issue with being vulnerable and being open to people. I feel like I have a very hard time being emotional and open and truthful and with my relationships. Now, if I were to continue this path, and I would say, now I start perpetrating this idea onto every man that I interact with, that you are not supposed to be emotional, and you should be able to not tolerate this at all. This is the most toxic thing that you could do. Now let's follow the steps. First, I have an issue. It's perfectly fine. Everyone's got their issues. Understandable, right? Doesn't matter as long as you work on it. But then instead of working on it, I fulfill myself by putting my issues into other people, and I start projecting myself so that I could feel like I'm not alone and that everyone else is the issue. If you aren't able to acknowledge your wrongdoings and move on from that, and you have such a loud arrogance about yourself, then it just denotes any form of masculinity about yourself. You're so childish and punitive. It's again disgusting. And then all in all, I think the most masculine virtue one can have would just be discipline. As to discipline to do something when you do not feel like it is a very, very important skill that is lacking from the majority of people here. Hello. And of course, discipline is not an easy thing to learn. So I'm not saying that everyone is evil and terrible people for not understanding how to use discipline. It's one of the most difficult things to do, to be able to control the self and to move according to your will, even when all of your feelings are going against yourself.
But the staggering amount of people do not even attempt to try to go towards it, and they live as brutes and animals, and that is the part that is displeasing. And what's even worse, people who do not live with discipline and then perpetuate this lifestyle to other people. That is the worst of the worst, the most disgusting.